During the Cold War, the superpowers were putting nuclear warheads on any and every weapons platform that they could. On aircraft, in torpedoes, on cruise and ballistic missiles of every range, artillery, recoilless rifles, and even backpacks. Newer and more advanced weapons were constantly being introduced. Both sides finally sought a way to end the madness. The US became increasingly worried about the road-mobile, multiple warhead SS-20s being built, and the Soviets were concerned about the Pershing II and the Gryphon, a ground-launched nuclear version of the Tomahawk cruise missile. In the second half of the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union began holding serious talks to discuss limiting and withdrawing portions of their nuclear arsenal from service. One of those agreements is the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF Treaty for short. The treaty was signed in 1987. It eliminated all conventional and nuclear ground-launched cruise and ballistic missiles, with ranges of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. The treaty eliminated thousands of missiles, including all the SS-20s, Pershing IIs, and the Gryphons. One interesting note about the treaty is that it only covered ground-launched weapons, not those weapons launched from air or sea. In this respect, the treaty could be seen as benefiting the US. The US has always had a much larger navy. They have a large number of surface ships, each able to carry several dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles, which would be banned if it was fired from land, but since it is ship-launched, it is not. In the beginning of the 21st century, Russia began having doubts about the treaty, partly due to most of their weapons being banned, yet America's go-to cruise missile, the Tomahawk, was not. In 2002, the US withdrew from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, which limited deployments of interceptor missiles able to shoot down intermediate and intercontinental range ballistic missiles. The US withdrew from the treaty to work on what became the GBI, or Ground-Based Interceptor. Russia worried that this weapon could pose a threat to their ability to hit targets, effectively eliminating their nuclear deterrent. Another issue the Russians have is that other nations not bound by this treaty are working on longer-range, ground-launched cruise and ballistic missiles. South Korea, North Korea, China, Israel, Iran, India, and Pakistan are currently either working on or already have such weapons. In 2007, President Putin called into question the INF Treaty, mentioning other countries' development of these weapons, and saying in these conditions we must think about ensuring our own security. Russian Defense Minister at the time, Sergei Ivanov, called the treaty a Cold War vestige, that it cannot go on forever, and Moscow signing the treaty was a grave mistake. In 2012, the US began complaining that Russia was in violation of the INF Treaty, and filed formal complaints against them in 2014. At the time, the Obama administration, however, did not state the specific weapons which it was saying violated the treaty. There had been speculations, but it wasn't until recently that the new administration came out and stated specifically which weapons they are. We now know that there are two particular weapons: a missile called the 9M729, a cruise missile which is said to use the Iskander launch platform, and the RS-26, a ballistic missile. The US claims the cruise missile is in direct violation of the treaty. It is ground-launched, and its range falls within the ranges banned. However, not much is publicly known about the weapon, but it is believed to be based on the naval cruise missile caliber, which itself is similar to the US Tomahawk. The US stated that the RS-26 is more of a circumvention of the treaty. It is currently classified as an ICBM, but the US states that when the missile was test-launched, it was deliberately launched with only one small warhead, so that it would fly far enough to be classified as an ICBM, and that in actuality the missile carries multiple warheads, which shortens its range into the ranges stated in the INF. Russia has always denied that they are in violation of the treaty. Russia also states that it is the US who is in violation. Russian Foreign Minister said that the drones the US has been using are against the treaty, as they are ground-launched. Also, the Mark 41 vertical launch system, commonly found on US naval ships, have been planned to be used in ground-launched systems such as Aegis Ashore. Russia claims that these Mark 41 launchers, which hold the SM-3 ballistic missile defense interceptors, can hold the Tomahawk cruise missiles, which again, if launched from land, would violate the treaty. Another claim is that the target practice missiles used by the US to test their interceptor missiles technically violate the treaty, and have all the same characteristics of intermediate range missiles. That last claim, however, has less credibility, as Article 7 of the treaty specifically states that if a ground-launched ballistic missile is of a type developed and tested solely to intercept and counter objects not located on the surface of the Earth, it shall not be considered to be a missile to which the limitations of this treaty apply. In response to the claimed Russian treaty violations, the US government has had several discussions on the course of action to take. Several options have been stated, from sanctioning the companies who are building these weapons, to developing their own treaty-breaking nuclear-armed missiles and deploying them in Europe within range of Moscow. However, if the US openly breaks the treaty, it would only validate Russia's position, and effectively end the treaty for good. The US has also discussed other options as well, such as reintroducing nuclear warheads to the Tomahawk cruise missile. Either way, this is a huge step backward. For decades, the US and Soviet Union, and later Russia, worked hard to eliminate the massive numbers of nuclear weapons that had been built. At a peak, the two countries combined had over 65,000 nuclear warheads. Today, that number has been decreased by almost 80%, and this treaty eliminated an entire class of missiles. If the INF treaty has been violated, or gets thrown out altogether, we could be headed to the beginning of a new arms race, not so different than that of 50 years ago.